This video is brought to you by our show, The Daily Briefing. It's no secret that the EU and Hungary haven't been friends for a while now. Europe claims that the member state is flagrantly violating their rules, while Hungary moans about EU overreach. However, after weeks, if not months, of fighting, spats, and warring words, it seems that, finally, something substantive has happened. The problem being that it's not exactly mutually beneficial, with the EU proposing suspending a multi-billion euro payment which was due to Hungary. So in this video, we'll explain what's just changed, whether the conflict between the two might just be about to come to an end, and why the EU has finally had enough. So what on earth is going on here? Well, on Sunday, the European Commission, the executive arm of the EU, formally proposed suspending 7.5 billion euros worth of funding earmarked for Hungary due to allegations of corruption and fraud. A suspension which is permitted under the only recently agreed conditionality mechanism, also known as the rule of law mechanism. This brand new mechanism allows financial sanctions to be levelled against EU member states in cases where there's a breach of the rule of law, and where said breaches affect or seriously risk affecting the sound financial management of the budget of the European Union, or the protection of the financial interests of the Union in a sufficiently direct way. Now, from the EU's point of view, this threshold has been met many times over. The EU has been complaining about a litany of rule of law breaches coming from Hungary for some time now. It was way back in December of 2015 when the European Commission first decided to get tough with Hungary, activating its so-called infringement procedure against the country in light of an asylum law that the Commission claimed was incompatible with EU laws. Then, in 2018, the Commission proceeded to refer Hungary to the Court of Justice of the European Union, again over its asylum laws, which, by this point, criminalised any assistance offered by any person on behalf of national, international, or non-governmental organisations to people wishing to apply for asylum or a residence permit in Hungary. That very same year, the European Parliament urged the Commission to take unprecedented disciplinary action against Hungary, something that the Commission has been hesitant to do, for the simple fact that until recently, their main weapon, the so-called nuclear option, wasn't really an option. That's because the old nuclear option, formerly Article 7, required every member state, barring the one in trouble, to sign off on the sanctions. In light of this, Poland and Hungary established a de facto pact. As the EU's resident troublemakers, they agreed that if either country gets to the point of being sanctioned under Article 7, the one not being sanctioned at the time would just veto proceedings. So, with the nuclear option out of the picture, the Commission had to come up with another way of trying to get Hungary back in line, which is where their new conditionality mechanism comes into play. That's because the new mechanism no longer requires unanimity in order to suspend Hungary's cash. No, the new mechanism requires the approval of member states by qualified majority voting. Under QMV, a double majority is needed to pass any proposal. Specifically, 55% of countries, or 15 out of the 27, representing at least 65% of the bloc's overall population. In any case, the specifics of the voting system are irrelevant. The key is that unanimity just isn't needed anymore. In other words, Poland can well vote against the suspension, but they just can't block it anymore. Now, even getting to this stage is unprecedented. Hungary is the first ever country to be subject to the conditionality mechanism, and among the first, if not the first, to ever face suspension of budgetary payments for any reason at all. And this entire episode comes just days after the European Parliament, in a symbolic vote, branded Hungary an electoral autocracy, and stressed that the nation could no longer be considered a full democracy in light of the deliberate and systematic efforts of the Hungarian government to undermine European values. Also in the symbolic vote, the European Parliament called on the Commission to refrain from approving Hungary's post-recovery COVID plan, as well as pausing funding on cohesion programs, contributing to the misuse of EU funds or breaches of the rule of law. And while the Commission's most recent move was likely weeks, if not months in the making, it does seem that the Parliament is slowly but surely getting their way. And that's at least in part because the EU has a significantly stronger negotiating position than Hungary does, with the EU holding more or less all of the cards. The EU has the money and the courts on their side, two of the big beasts in any political fight, especially between countries and international organisations. That's not to say that Hungary has nothing to bargain with, though, because, after all, the EU is underpinned by the concept of consensus. Significant decisions on the likes of taxation, operational police cooperation between member states, and the EU's common foreign and security policy are still taken on the basis of unanimity. And while a number of EU heavyweights, including France's Emmanuel Macron and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, want to change the rules to scrap the unanimity requirement completely, for now, unanimity remains, and a single dissenting voice, like that of Hungary, can and has scuppered all kinds of plans. But if the words coming out of Hungary are to be believed, it does seem that the threat to withdraw cash is working. Hungary's government has already stressed that it will implement all of the necessary measures requested by the EU, something it stated late on Monday when a bill was put before Hungary's parliament that mandates stronger cooperation with OLAF, the EU's anti-fraud office, and which seeks to address some of the conflict of interest and corruption concerns raised by the EU. While this most recent pledge to address the EU's concerns will undoubtedly be welcomed in Brussels, it's not going to necessarily stop this process overnight, for the simple reason that it's one thing to say that you're going to do something, and it's a whole nother story to actually do it. Hungary, under Viktor Orban, also has something of a track record for making pledges and proceeding to water them down later on. Ultimately, what happens next will be a question of Hungary putting its money where its mouth is, or more specifically, a question of whether Hungary's even going to get that money back in the first place. If you do want to find out what happens next in this story, we update you on the biggest news stories every day over on the Daily Briefing. That's our show where we break down the 4 biggest news stories each and every day, giving you an outline of the news you need to know and ensuring that you're always informed and up to date. And unlike other similar shows, ours has the normal TLDR style, which means that it's quick, easy to understand, unbiased, independent, and sometimes hosted by me. You can watch on YouTube or on Nebula by subscribing to the TLDR Daily channel. It's linked down below. Or you can listen by searching in your favourite podcast app. Thanks for your support.